His hand reaches for my son's face, and the entire hall holds its breath. The king who cast me into the rain now stands before the proof he tried to bury. My heart pounds against my ribs like a prisoner demanding freedom. The silence weighs more than any crown, and in his eyes I see the war between what he wants and what he fears. One word from him could destroy us, or save us. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're watching from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The rain fell with the insistence of someone trying to erase evidence, but there are things that neither time nor water can dissolve. I remember the cold cutting through my skin when the palace doors slammed shut behind me, the sound of iron locking my sentence into place. I had nothing left, only the name they denied me and the womb where his mistake was growing. That night, I was left outside with my hair plastered to my face and the taste of iron in my mouth, while the world I knew spat me out like a plague. I was 19 years old, and I had believed in fairy tales. The palace of King Alaric, the Alpha King, as his people called him with reverence that bordered on worship, had been my home since childhood. Not as a princess, of course, never that. I was the daughter of a seamstress who died when I was 7, leaving me to the mercy of the royal household. They kept me on as a servant girl, someone to polish silver and scrub floors, to remain invisible while the nobility danced and plotted their games of power. I learned early to make myself small, to move through corridors like a ghost, to lower my eyes when lords passed by with their cruel laughter and wandering hands. The other servants pitied me, some protected me, but most simply ignored me. I was no one, a shadow among shadows, until he noticed me. It happened on a winter evening, during preparations for the solstice ball. I was arranging white roses in the grand hall, standing on a ladder to reach the high garlands when I lost my balance. I expected to hit the marble floor to break something, to be punished for ruining the decorations. Instead, I fell into arms that felt like iron wrapped in velvet. "Careful," he said, and his voice vibrated through my entire body. I looked up into eyes the colour of storm clouds, into a face carved with such perfect severity that it seemed almost cruel. King Alaric held me as if I weighed nothing, his hands steady on my waist, and for a moment the entire world narrowed to the space between us. I could feel his heartbeat, or maybe it was mine, I couldn't tell. The scent of leather and pines surrounded me, mixed with something darker, something that made my pulse quicken with instinct I didn't understand. "I'm sorry." "Your Majesty," I whispered, trying to pull away. But his grip tightened slightly. "Your name," he demanded. Not asked. "Mira, Your Majesty?" "Mira." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting each letter. Then he released me, stepping back with that commanding presence that made the air itself seem to bow. "Be more careful, Mira." He walked away, his black cloak sweeping behind him like a piece of the night itself. And I stood there trembling, not from fear but from something I had no name for. The other servants stared at me with wide eyes, whispering behind their hands. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Stay away from him," she hissed in my ear. "Girls like you don't survive the attention of men like that." But it was too late. He had spoken my name, and something had shifted in the fabric of my small, invisible life. After that night, I felt his eyes on me constantly. During meals served in the great hall, I would sense his gaze following me as I poured wine and cleared plates. When I crossed the courtyard carrying baskets of laundry, I would look up to find him watching from his balcony, still as a statue, his expression unreadable. The weight of his attention was like standing too close to a fire, simultaneously thrilling and dangerous. The other servants noticed too. The whispers grew louder, more vicious. The ladies in waiting, those perfumed creatures in silk and jewels, began to look at me with narrowed eyes and painted smiles that promised cruelty. Lady Cordelia, the king's intended bride, a match arranged by political necessity, made it her personal mission to ensure I understood my place. "The king has a habit of noticing pretty things," she told me one afternoon, cornering me in the linen room. Her beauty was the kind that cut like glass. Sharp, cold, perfectly arranged. But pretty things are easily replaced. Remember that before you get ideas above your station, little mouse? I nodded, keeping my eyes down. my hands clenched in my apron. But inside, something rebellious was stirring. I had never wanted anything for myself, had never dared to dream beyond survival. Now, every time he looked at me, I felt possibility crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. The first time he touched me again was 3 weeks later, in the library. I had been sent to dust the shelves, a task I loved because it gave me access to books, those forbidden treasures that opened worlds beyond my reach. I was so absorbed in reading a page about distant lands that I didn't hear him approach. "Do you read often?" His voice came from directly behind me, and I nearly dropped the book. I spun around, my back pressed against the shelf, my heart hammering. He stood so close I could see the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, could count the faint scars on his jaw that spoke of battles fought and won. "I'm sorry." "Your Majesty, I shouldn't have—" "I asked if you read often," he interrupted. And there was something in his eyes that looked almost like curiosity. "When I can," I admitted, deciding that truth was less dangerous than lies with a man who seemed to see through everything. He took the book from my trembling hands, his fingers brushing mine with deliberate slowness. "This one is about the southern kingdoms. Have you ever wanted to travel, Mira?" The way he said my name made my skin flush with heat. "I've never been beyond the palace walls, Your Majesty." "Never?" Something that might have been surprise crossed his features. He studied me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, as if he could read every secret thought I'd ever had. "What would you do if you could go anywhere?" No one had ever asked me such a question. I struggled to find words. I don't know. I've never allowed myself to imagine it. "Then start imagining it now." He set the book in my hands again, his fingers lingering over mine. "Life is too short to live without dreams, even for a servant girl." "Especially for a servant girl," I whispered without thinking, and immediately regretted my boldness. But instead of anger, I saw the corner of his mouth lift in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Perhaps you're right." He stepped closer and I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of leather and pine, and something uniquely him. "You're different from the others, Mira. You have fire in you, even though you try to hide it. Fire gets people like me burned, Your Majesty, and ice keeps people like me alone." His hand rose, and I thought he might touch my face, but he stopped just short, his fingers hovering in the air between us. "What if I told you I'm tired of being alone?" My breath caught in my throat. This was dangerous ground, territory where girls like me disappeared and were never spoken of again. I knew I should lower my eyes, should remember my place, should run before I drowned in those storm cloud eyes. But I had spent my entire life being small, being invisible, being nothing. And for the first time, someone was seeing me, really seeing me. "Then I would say," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "that kings and servant girls don't exist in the same world. Your Majesty." "No," he agreed, and his hand finally touched my cheek, his thumb tracing my jawline with aching gentleness. "They don't. But perhaps that's what makes this so compelling." He leaned down and I thought he would kiss me, wanted him to kiss me with a desperation that terrified me. But instead, he pressed his forehead against mine, breathing me in as if I were air and he had been suffocating. "You should stay away from me," he murmured against my skin. "I will ruin you." "You already have," I whispered back, and it was true. From the moment he caught me, from the first time he spoke my name, I had been irreversibly changed. He pulled away abruptly, his expression hardening into that mask of royal control. "Go before someone finds us here." I fled, my heart pounding, my entire body trembling with feelings I had no words for. Behind me I heard him exhale roughly, and I knew with absolute certainty that whatever had started between us would not end well. But knowing something and being able to stop it are two very different things. The next 3 months were a fever, dream of stolen moments and whispered conversations. He would summon me to his private study under the pretense of needing something, wine, a book, fresh candles. But we both knew the truth. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. About his burdens as king and my dreams of freedom. About the loneliness of being seen without being known. He told me about the weight of the crown, how every decision carried the lives of thousands, how he could trust no one because everyone wanted something from him. I told him about growing up invisible, about watching life happen to other people while I existed in the margins. We were two prisoners in different cells, finding momentary escape in each other. And then, inevitably, talking wasn't enough. It happened during a thunderstorm, the same kind of storm that would later become the symbol of my downfall. Lightning split the sky as I brought him wine in his chambers, and when I turned to leave, he caught my wrist. "Stay," he said, and it wasn't a command. It was a plea. I should have said no. Should have remembered Lady Cordelia and the wedding being planned. Should have thought about consequences and propriety and all the reasons why a king and a servant girl existed in different universes. But his touch burned through my skin, and I was so tired of being cold, of being alone, of being nothing. "Your Majesty." "Alaric," he interrupted, pulling me closer. "When we're alone, call me Alaric." "Alaric," I whispered, and his name tasted like sin and salvation on my tongue. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses described in the romance books I secretly read. It was consuming, desperate, a collision of two people who had been starving without knowing it. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me against him with a strength that should have frightened me, but instead made me feel alive for the first time in my life. We fell into his bed as thunder shook the palace walls, and he worshipped my body with a reverence that made me weep. He whispered my name like a prayer, traced my scars and imperfections with such tenderness that I forgot for those few hours that I was nothing. In his arms, I was everything. Afterward, as we lay tangled in silk sheets with the storm raging outside, he held me against his chest and said the words that doomed us both. "I wish I had met you in another life," he murmured into my hair, "where I could keep you." "But you can't," I said, reality creeping back in with the cold. "No." His arms tightened around me. "But tonight let me pretend." That night became many nights. We existed in a secret world made of shadows and whispered promises, where titles and stations didn't matter. But outside that world, the palace watched and waited and sharpened its knives. Lady Cordelia's suspicions grew with each passing week. She watched me with eyes like a hawk circling prey, and her cruelty became more pointed, more public. She would accidentally spill wine on me during banquets, would assign me the most degrading tasks, would make sure I understood that I was expendable. "The king enjoys his diversions," she told me one evening, her smile sharp as a blade. "But he always returns to what's proper, to what's expected. Girls like you are forgotten the moment they leave his bed." I wanted to believe she was wrong, wanted to trust in the way Alaric looked at me, the promises he whispered in darkness. But doubt grew like poison ivy in my chest, wrapping around my heart and squeezing. Then I missed my monthly bleeding. Terror seized me as I counted the days, checked again, prayed to gods I didn't believe in that I was wrong. But my body didn't lie. I was carrying the king's child, and there was no world in which that ended well for me. I knew I had to tell him, but fear paralyzed me. What would he do? Would he cast me out? Pay for some herb woman to rid me of the problem? Or worse, would he look at me with disgust as if I had trapped him deliberately? For 2 weeks I carried the secret alone, feeling it grow heavier with each passing day. I became clumsy, distracted, and Mrs. Thorne noticed. "You look pale, child," she said, studying me with concern that felt almost maternal. "Are you ill?" "Just tired," I lied, but she saw through me. She always had. She pulled me into an empty room, her weathered hands gripping my shoulders. "Mira, tell me true. Has the king? Has he touched you?" The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. I couldn't speak, could only nod as shame and fear and desperate love warred inside me. Mrs. Thorne's face crumpled with sorrow. "Oh, child. Oh, you foolish, foolish child." She pulled me into her arms as I sobbed. "How far along?" 6 weeks, maybe 7, I choked out. She was silent for a long moment, stroking my hair. Then, "You have to tell him. Tonight." "I'm afraid," I whispered. "As you should be." Her voice was gentle but unflinching. "But waiting won't make it easier. And if Lady Cordelia finds out before he does, she didn't need to finish that sentence. That night, I went to his chambers with my heart in my throat and my hands shaking. He was at his desk reviewing documents by candlelight, and when he saw me, his expression softened with the tenderness he reserved only for our private moments. "Mira," he said, rising, "I didn't send for you. Not that I'm complaining." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I need to tell you something," I managed, and something in my voice made him freeze. "What is it?" The words stuck in my throat. I forced them out. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt like falling off a cliff. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, fear, and something I couldn't name. He turned away from me, his hand raking through his hair. "Are you certain?" His voice was carefully controlled, which somehow made it worse. "Yes." "How long?" "7 weeks." More silence. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I watched his back, watched his shoulders rise and fall with each breath, and I knew. I knew what was coming before he spoke. "This complicates things," he finally said, and each word felt like a knife. "I know." He turned back to me, and the tenderness was gone, replaced by the mask of the king. "The wedding to Lady Cordelia is in 3 weeks. The alliance with her father's kingdom is crucial for peace. I can't—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I can't acknowledge the child." Each word landed like a blow. "I understand," I whispered, even though I didn't, even though my heart was shattering. "I'll provide for you," he continued. "All business now, all calculation. Enough money to go somewhere far from here to start over. You'll want for nothing." "Except you," I said, and hated how small my voice sounded. His expression cracked for just a moment, showing the pain beneath. "Except me? And if I said I didn't want money? If I said I wanted you? Then you'd be asking for something I can't give." He stepped closer, and I saw the war in his eyes, duty versus desire, power versus heart. "Mira, if I could, if there were any way—" "But there isn't," I finished for him. "Because I'm no one, and you're a king, and that's all that matters." "That's all that's ever mattered," he said quietly. I should have left then, should have accepted the money and disappeared with whatever dignity I had left. But rage bloomed in my chest, hot and righteous. "You said I had fire in me," I said, my voice shaking. "You said you were tired of being alone. Were those lies?" "No." He looked at me with such anguish it almost broke my anger. "But they were the words of a man, not a king, and I am a king first." "Then I hope your crown keeps you warm at night," I spat and turned to leave. His hand caught my arm. "Mira, please. I'm trying to protect you." I laughed, a bitter sound. "By sending me away with money like I'm a problem to be solved? By pretending this child doesn't exist?" "Yes," he said, and the honesty of it hurt more than any lie. "Because the alternative is watching you be destroyed by this court. Do you think Lady Cordelia would show mercy? Do you think the nobles would let a servant girl's bastard exist without consequences? They would tear you apart, and there would be nothing I could do to stop them without destroying everything I've built." "So your kingdom is worth more than us," I said softly. He released my arm, stepping back. "A king doesn't have the luxury of choosing love over duty." "Then you were never the man I thought you were," I said, and walked out of his chambers with my head high and my heart in pieces. 3 days later, as rain poured from a sky the colour of iron, I was summoned to the throne room. I knew what was coming, had heard the whispers among the servants. Lady Cordelia had found out someone had told her. Someone always tells. And she had demanded my removal. I entered the great hall to find it full of nobles and courtiers, all watching me with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Lady Cordelia stood beside the throne, beautiful and terrible in crimson silk, her smile triumphant. And Alaric sat upon his throne, his face carved from stone, his eyes refusing to meet mine. "Mira of no house, no family," Lady Cordelia announced, her voice ringing through the hall. "You stand accused of seducing the king, of spreading lies about carrying his child, of attempting to disrupt the sacred union between His Majesty and myself. What say you?" I looked at Alaric then, willing him to speak, to defend me, to show even a fraction of the man he became in darkness. But he remained silent. his jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the armrest of his throne. "I say," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear flooding my veins, "that I have lied about nothing. The child I carry is the king's, and no amount of denial will change that truth." Gasps echoed through the hall. Lady Cordelia's eyes flashed with rage. "You dare—" "Enough," Alaric finally spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. He stood, descending from his throne with slow, measured steps. When he reached me, he looked down with eyes that were completely cold, completely empty. "You will leave this palace tonight. You will take what coin you're given and disappear. If you speak of this again, if you ever attempt to return, you will be imprisoned. Is that clear?" Each word was a death blow. I stared up at the stranger wearing Alaric's face, and felt something inside me die. Crystal clear. "Your Majesty," I whispered. "Then go," he said, and turned his back on me. I was escorted out as rain began to fall, the guards roughly pushing me through corridors I had once called home. They gave me a small purse of coins and shoved me out the servants' entrance into the storm. The doors slammed shut behind me, the sound of iron locking my exile into place. I stood there in the rain, my hair plastering to my face, my dress soaking through, one hand pressed to the barely there swell of my belly where his child grew. And I made a vow, there in the rain and the darkness and the cold. Someday, somehow, I would return. And he would face what he had tried to bury. Years passed like pages torn from a book I was no longer allowed to read. I found shelter in a small river town called Millbrook, far enough from the capital that no one knew me, close enough to remind me daily of what I had lost. The coins Alaric gave me ran out within 6 months, and I learned to survive through work that left my hands calloused and my back aching. Washing clothes, mending nets, cleaning fish at the market. The child came on a night when winter gripped the land with teeth of ice. I laboured alone in a rented room above a tavern, biting down on leather to keep from screaming, while a midwife I could barely afford talked me through each contraction. When I heard his first cry, I wept not from joy but from terror, because I knew, looking at his tiny face, that he was undeniably his father's son. I named him Finn, after the river that had become my only constant companion. He had Alaric's eyes, that same storm cloud grey, and as he grew, the resemblance became impossible to ignore. The sharp jawline, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, even the stubborn set of his shoulders. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had abandoned us. But I also saw myself in him. My resilience, my fire, my refusal to accept the smallness the world tried to force upon me. Finn grew up strong and curious, asking endless questions about the world beyond our small town. I told him his father was a powerful man who couldn't acknowledge him, and that seemed to satisfy his child's understanding of the world's unfairness. "Will I ever meet him?" he asked when he was 7, watching boats sail down the river toward the capital. "Maybe," I answered, not yet knowing if it was a promise or a threat. Life in Millbrook was hard but simple. I found work at a seamstress shop. The owner, a kind widow named Martha, reminded me of Mrs. Thorne and asked no uncomfortable questions about my past. The other women whispered about me, of course. A woman alone with a child and no husband was always subject to speculation, but I had learned to wear their judgment like armour. Finn attended the local school when we could afford it, and the teacher, an old scholar named Master Benedict, recognised something special in him. "Your boy is brilliant," he told me one autumn afternoon. "Sharp as a blade and twice as quick. He should be in the capital's academy, not wasting his potential here." The capital. The palace. The thought sent ice through my veins and fire through my chest simultaneously. "Perhaps someday," I told him and changed the subject. But as Finn grew older, as the years stretched from 1 to 5 to 9, the anger I had buried began to surface. I would lie awake at night, listening to the river and thinking about Alaric in his palace, living his life without consequence while I struggled to feed and clothe his son. Did he ever think of us? Did he ever wonder if the child survived, if I survived? Or had we become just another forgotten mistake? The turning point came when Finn was 10. We were at the market when a royal procession passed through town. The king and his entourage travelling to inspect the outer provinces. I saw him before he saw me, sitting atop a magnificent black horse, wearing the crown I had seen only in my dreams for years. He looked older, wearier, as if the weight of the crown had physically pressed him down. Lady Cordelia rode beside him, beautiful as ever, though I noticed she wore sorrow like an expensive shawl, childless I had heard through rumours, despite 10 years of marriage. The nobles whispered it was divine punishment for some sin, though no one dared say whose sin. I should have pulled Finn away, should have hidden in the crowd, but something in me refused to cower. I stood there, my son's hand in mine, and waited. And then Alaric's eyes found mine across the crowded market square. I saw shock register on his face, saw him pale beneath his tan, saw his hand tighten on the reins until his horse shifted nervously. His gaze dropped to Finn, and even from a distance I could see the exact moment he recognized his own features staring back at him. The procession stopped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Lady Cordelia followed her husband's stare, and her expression turned to cold fury. "Mama, why is the king looking at us?" Finn whispered, confused. "Because," I said, loud enough for my voice to carry, "sometimes the past comes back to remind us of our debts." Alaric flinched as if I had struck him. For a long moment we stared at each other across the divide of years and choices and consequences. Then he spurred his horse forward, and the procession continued, leaving me standing in the market with my heart pounding and my son looking up at me with questions I wasn't ready to answer. But something had shifted in that moment. Something had cracked in the dam I had built around my anger. That night, after Finn was asleep, I sat by the fire and made a decision that would change everything. I would return to the capital, not to beg or plead or ask for charity. I would return to make Alaric face what he had abandoned, to show him the boy who carried his blood and his face, to force him to choose publicly whether to acknowledge his son or reject him again, and let the court and the kingdom watch him do it. It took me 3 years to prepare. 3 years of saving every spare coin, of teaching Finn about his heritage without revealing the full truth, of steeling myself for the battle ahead. I worked extra hours, took on commissions that kept me sewing by candlelight until my eyes burned. Martha, who had figured out the truth long ago, tried to talk me out of it. "Mira, child, what do you think you'll accomplish?" she asked, her weathered hands covering mine. "The court will destroy you. They'll call the boy a bastard and you a whore, and the king will do nothing to stop them." "Maybe," I agreed. "Or maybe seeing his son will wake something in him that's been sleeping. And if it doesn't, then at least Finn will know I tried. At least he'll know that someone fought for him." On the day we left for the capital, Finn was 13, old enough to understand what we were doing, young enough to still believe in justice. I had told him the truth the night before, told him that the king was his father, that we had been cast out, that we were returning to claim what was rightfully his. He had been silent for a long time, processing. "Then, does he know about me?" "Yes. And he still sent us away?" "Yes." Another silence. Then, "I hate him." "That's fair," I said, pulling him close. "But hate and love are often two sides of the same coin. Remember that." The journey to the capital took 2 weeks. We travelled with merchant caravans for safety, and with each mile closer, my stomach churned with equal parts fear and determination. The landscape changed from river valleys to rolling hills to the marble grandeur of the capital city spreading before us like a jewelled beast. The palace rose in the distance, white and gold and terrible in its beauty. Finn stared at it with wide eyes, and I wondered what he saw. Opportunity or prison, birthright or curse. We arrived in autumn, when the leaves turned copper and the air smelled of wood smoke and change. I had no plan beyond audacity. I would simply walk into the palace with my son and demand an audience. Let them try to ignore us. Let them try to pretend we didn't exist. But I had underestimated both the palace's memory and its cruelty. Word of our arrival spread before we even reached the gates. By the time we climbed the marble steps, a crowd of courtiers had gathered, their whispers hissing like snakes. "Is that the servant girl, the one who claimed, 'Look at the boy'?" The resemblance is impossible to deny. I held my head high and Finn's hand tight as we walked through doors that had once expelled me into the rain. The grand hall looked exactly as I remembered, opulent, cold, designed to make small people feel smaller. But I was no longer small. I was a mother fighting for her child, and there is no force more powerful than that. The hall fell silent as we entered. I saw familiar faces, older now, harder, and new ones watching with vulture-like interest. Lady Cordelia stood near the throne, her beauty now edged with bitterness, her eyes promising murder. And on the throne sat Alaric, looking like he had aged 20 years instead of 13. But when he saw Finn, really saw him, I watched something break in his carefully controlled expression. The boy was his perfect mirror, undeniable proof of everything he had tried to bury. Finn squeezed my hand, frightened by the intensity of attention, and I whispered, "Stand tall. You have as much right to be here as any of them. Who dares enter this hall unbidden?" Lady Cordelia's voice rang out, theatrical in its outrage. "Guards, remove these intruders!" "I dare," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I am Mira, and this is Finn. We come to claim what was stolen from us." "You have no claim here," Cordelia spat. "You were expelled years ago for spreading lies about the king. Now you return with this child trying to—" "Look at him," I interrupted, my eyes locked on Alaric. "Look at his face and tell me he's not your son." The hall erupted in whispers. Alaric rose slowly from his throne, his eyes never leaving Finn's face. He descended the steps with the same measured pace I remembered, but his hands trembled slightly, the only sign of his inner turmoil. When he stopped before us, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath, the silence stretched like a rope pulled too tight, ready to snap. Alaric stood 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the silver now threading through his dark hair, the lines carved around his eyes by years of carrying burdens I couldn't imagine. But it was Finn he stared at, his gaze drinking in every detail of the boy's face with an expression that cycled through shock, wonder, and something that looked like grief. "How old?" Alaric's voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but it carried in the hushed hall. 13, I answered. "Born 9 months after the night you cast me out into the rain." His jaw clenched at the reminder, but he didn't look away from Finn. "What's your name, boy?" Finn straightened his shoulders, and I felt pride bloom in my chest as he met the king's eyes without flinching. "Finn, your majesty. Finn Rivers, for the place where I was raised." "Rivers," Alaric repeated, and something painful flickered across his features. "A bastard name." "A name earned by survival," Finn replied with a sharpness that reminded me achingly of his father. "Which is more than some can say about their titles." Gasps echoed through the hall. I squeezed Finn's hand in warning, but Alaric's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Bold words," the king said. "Dangerous words in this place. Truth often is," Finn shot back. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, king and bastard, father and son. 2 people connected by blood and separated by everything else. I watched the battle play out on Alaric's face, the war between what he wanted and what he could allow himself to want. Lady Cordelia's voice shattered the moment. "This is absurd. Your Majesty, surely you won't entertain this charade. This woman is clearly trying to—" "Cordelia." Alaric's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Be silent." The Queen's face flushed with rage and humiliation, but she obeyed, her hands clenching into fists in her skirts. The courtiers whispered more frantically, sensing blood in the water. Alaric turned to me then, and the look in his eyes was complicated. Anger, regret, something that might have been longing. "Why come back now, after all this time?" "Because," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching, "what you abandoned in the rain has grown into something you can no longer ignore. Because your son deserves to know his father. Because I'm tired of protecting your secrets while we struggled to survive." "I gave you money," he said, and there was defensiveness in his tone. "Money that ran out in 6 months," I countered. "Money that didn't fill the space where a father should have been. Money that didn't answer Finn's questions about why he was different, why we were alone." "I did what I had to do," Alaric said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "For your kingdom," I agreed. "But what about for your son?" He flinched again, and I realized with satisfaction that my words were landing like blows. Good. He deserved to hurt the way I had hurt. The way Finn had hurt every time another boy talked about his father while Finn had only silence. Your Majesty, a voice spoke from the crowd. Lord Pembroke, an elderly advisor I remembered from my servant days. If what this woman claims is true, it creates complications for the succession. Without a legitimate heir, the boy's existence raises questions about— There is no legitimate heir, Lady Cordelia snapped, her composure cracking. 10 years of marriage and the king's seed has taken root nowhere but in a servant's womb. Perhaps that should tell us something. The cruelty in her voice was a whip, but I refused to flinch. I had endured worse, but beside me Finn tensed, his young face hardening with protective anger. Don't speak about my mother that way, he said, his voice carrying surprising authority for a 13-year-old boy. Cordelia laughed, a brittle sound. Your mother is a whore who seduced a king and now comes crawling back for gold. Enough! Alaric's voice boomed through the hall, and the sheer force of it made everyone step back. He was furious now, truly furious, his control finally fracturing. Another word against them, Cordelia, and you will regret it. The Queen stared at her husband in shock. In all their years of marriage, he had never defended anyone against her, never showed preference, never indicated that he cared about anything beyond duty and appearance. Now, he was choosing a servant girl and a bastard boy over his queen in front of the entire court. You would shame me for them? Cordelia's voice shook with rage and hurt. You would humiliate your wife, your queen, for a mistake from your past? I'm shaming you for your cruelty, Alaric corrected, his voice cold. A quality you've displayed far too often over the years. The marriage had clearly been as loveless as the rumours suggested. I watched the Queen's face crumble before reforming into a mask of icy dignity. She turned and swept from the hall, her ladies-in-waiting scurrying after her like disturbed birds. The remaining courtiers watched with avid interest, already composing the gossip they would spread through every corner of the kingdom. Alaric seemed to realise this, and I saw him physically pull his control back into place, his expression smoothing into royal neutrality. Mira, he said, formal now, the king speaking rather than the man. You and the boy will be given chambers in the East Wing. You will stay here while we determine the appropriate course of action. We don't need your charity, I started, but he cut me off. This isn't charity. It's acknowledgement. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a plea. Give me time to navigate this properly. You've had 13 years, I pointed out, and you've given me no warning, he countered. You've walked in here and detonated a bomb in the middle of my court. Did you expect me to immediately upend everything? I expected you to be a father, I said softly, and watched him wince. Finn tugged my hand. Mama, I'm tired. The reminder that my 13-year-old son had just travelled for 2 weeks and then faced down a hostile court softened my anger. I nodded. Fine, we'll accept your hospitality, Your Majesty. But don't think this conversation is over. I wouldn't dream of it, he said, and there was something almost like admiration in his eyes. A servant was summoned, not Mrs. Thorne, who had died 3 years ago, according to rumours, but a younger woman who looked at us with curiosity rather than judgment. She led us through familiar corridors to a suite of rooms that were nicer than anywhere I had lived since leaving the palace. Finn immediately collapsed onto a bed that could have fit 5 of him, his eyes already closing with exhaustion. I tucked a blanket around him, smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. He looked so young in sleep, so vulnerable, and doubt crept in. Had I done the right thing bringing him here? Or had I just delivered him into the jaws of a system designed to destroy people like us? Mama? His voice was drowsy. Is he going to acknowledge me? I don't know, baby. Do you still love him? The question was so quiet, I almost missed it. I was silent for a long moment, considering the truth. I love the man he was when we were alone, I finally answered. I don't know if that man still exists. I don't think I can love someone who abandoned us, Finn mumbled, already drifting off. You don't have to, I whispered, kissing his forehead. You just have to let him try to earn it. I sat by his bedside until his breathing deepened into true sleep, then moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens. The autumn moon painted everything in silver, and I could see the maze where Alaric and I had once stolen kisses between the hedges. The fountain where he had told me about his childhood loneliness. The bench where he had first said he wished he could keep me. A knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Alaric standing in the hallway, having changed from his formal robes into simple dark clothes. He looked younger this way, more like the man I remembered. "May I come in?" he asked, and there was such uncertainty in his voice that I stepped back, allowing him entry. He walked directly to where Finn slept, standing over the bed with an expression of wonder mixed with pain. "He looks like me," he said unnecessarily. "Everyone can see it," I agreed, moving to stand beside him. "That's why I came back. You can't hide him anymore." "I never should have tried." Alaric's voice was raw. "I should have fought for you, for him. I should have found a way." "But you didn't," I said, and there was no accusation in it, just fact. "I was weak," he admitted, and I had never heard a king call himself weak before. "I chose the easier path, the safe path, and I've regretted it every day since." "Have you?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Because you seemed to manage just fine from where I was standing." He turned to face me, and in his eyes I saw a decade of loneliness. "I haven't touched Cordelia in 8 years," he said quietly. "Haven't wanted to, haven't been able to. Every time I close my eyes, I see you standing in the rain, and I hate myself a little. More." The confession hung between us, heavy with implications. I wanted to comfort him and slap him simultaneously. "That's not my problem," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "No," he agreed, "but it's the truth." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and touched my cheek the way he used to. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." My breath caught. His thumb traced my jawline, and muscle memory made me lean into the touch before I caught myself. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't make this harder than it is." "It's already impossible," he murmured, his forehead dropping to rest against mine in that achingly familiar gesture. "You've come back and reminded me of everything I gave up, everything I lost. How am I supposed to navigate that?" "The same way I did," I said, pulling back. "One day at a time, putting your child first." He looked at Finn again, his expression softening. "Tell me about him. Tell me everything I missed." So I did. I told him about the difficult birth, about Finn's first word, about how he loved to swim in the river and ask endless questions about stars. I told him about the time Finn fought 3 older boys who called me names, about how he excelled at his lessons, about his kindness towards stray animals and elderly neighbours. Alaric listened to every word as if I were describing miracles, and maybe I was. By the time I finished, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I've missed everything," he said hoarsely. 13 years of his life gone. "Then don't miss any more," I replied. "Be his father now." "And you?" His eyes searched mine. "What do you want from me?" It was the question I had been asking myself for years. Revenge, acknowledgement, money, love. In the end, what I wanted was simple and impossibly complicated. "I want Finn to have what he deserves," I said. "A father who claims him, a place in the world, security. What I want for myself," I paused. "I'm not sure yet." "Fair enough," he said softly. "Then I should go before anyone sees me here. It would complicate things further." "Everything about this is already complicated," I pointed out. "True." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Mira, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm glad you came back." After he left, I lay down beside Finn on the massive bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Cordelia's rage, court politics, nobles measuring Finn like a threat or an opportunity. But tonight we were safe, warm, and in the place that should have been ours all along. I fell asleep to the sound of Finn's breathing and the ghost of Alaric's touch still warm on my skin. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of an execution. I woke to find servants delivering breakfast and laying out clothes that must have cost more than I earned in a year. Finn stood at the window, watching the palace come to life below, his young face troubled. "They're all talking about us," he said without turning. "I can hear them in the courtyards." "Let them talk," I replied, though my stomach churned with anxiety. "Words can't hurt us, can't they?" He faced me and I saw fear in those storm cloud eyes. "What if the king decides we're too much trouble? What if he sends us away again?" I pulled him into a fierce hug. "Then we'll survive just like we always have. We're stronger than they think." A knock interrupted us. not the timid tap of a servant, but an authoritative rap that demanded response. I opened the door to find Lord Pembroke, flanked by 2 younger advisers. "The King requests your presence in his private council chamber," Pembroke said, his tone neutral but his eyes calculating. "The boy should come as well." The council chamber was dominated by a large table where 5 men sat waiting. Alaric at the head and 3 key advisers. No Cordelia, I noticed. This was politics, not performance. "Sit," Alaric said, gesturing to chairs across from him. His tone was formal, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a silent apology. "Gentlemen," Alaric began, addressing his advisers, "you've all heard the claims made yesterday. Before we proceed, I want to state clearly that I believe Mira speaks the truth. The boy is mine." The admission sent shockwaves through the room. "Your Majesty," one adviser, Lord Vallemont, started carefully. "With all respect, such an acknowledgement carries significant implications for the succession. For your marriage, for—" "I'm aware of the implications," Alaric cut him off, "which is why we're here." "To navigate them," Lord Pembroke cleared his throat. "There is precedent for acknowledging bastards without legitimising them. They can be given titles, incomes, positions at court, while maintaining the distinction." "I have no legitimate issue," Alaric said bluntly. "Queen Cordelia and I have produced no heirs. It's unlikely at this point that we will, which means Finn is my only child." "Then perhaps," suggested Lord Thaddeus, the 3rd adviser, "the solution is to set the boy aside somewhere comfortable but distant. A manor in the countryside, an income, but no title." "I'm not asking what would be convenient," Alaric interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "And I'm not sending my son away to be forgotten." "Then what are you proposing?" Vallemont demanded. Alaric was silent for a long moment. "Finally, I propose to name him as my acknowledged son and heir apparent." The room exploded with objections, but Alaric silenced them all with a thunderous command. "A decision that could split the kingdom," Pembroke said quietly. "Your Majesty, legitimising a bastard, especially one born to a servant, will be seen as weakness by some, blasphemy by others." "Let it be enormous," Alaric said. "I've spent 13 years living with the consequences of cowardice. I won't spend the rest of my life adding to them." "There is another option," I said quietly, and all eyes turned to me. "Don't legitimise him, not yet. Let him stay here. Let people see him. Let him prove his worth through actions rather than decree. If he's truly meant to be your heir, let him earn it." Alaric studied me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You want him to win them over?" "I want him to be undeniable," I corrected. "So that when you do legitimise him, it's recognition of merit." Pembroke nodded slowly. "There's wisdom in that. Introduce the boy gradually, let him train with the knights, study with the scholars. If he proves himself capable—" "He will," I said firmly. "Then the legitimisation, when it comes, will be easier for the nobles to swallow," Pembroke finished. "And the Queen?" Vallemont asked. "I'll handle the Queen," Alaric said. "Finn will stay here as my acknowledged but illegitimate son. He will receive education, training, everything a prince would receive. And when the time is right, when he's proven himself, we'll revisit legitimisation." It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than I had dared hope for. I looked at Finn, whose jaw was set in that stubborn line that was pure Alaric. "And my mother?" Finn spoke for the first time. "What happens to her?" Alaric's eyes met mine. "Your mother will remain here as well, under my protection. Anyone who insults or harms her will answer to me." "As what?" Vallemont demanded. "A lady of the court," Alaric said firmly. "With her own household, her own income, her own standing." "Fine," I said. Understanding this was about protecting me to protect Finn. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened, father and son spent increasing amounts of time together. Alaric rearranged his schedule to teach Finn riding in the mornings, to dine with him at midday, to review his studies in the evening. I watched from a distance, my heart both swelling and aching. The court watched too, their initial shock giving way to fascination. Some nobles remained hostile, but others, particularly the younger knights and ladies, were charmed by the intelligent, well-spoken boy who treated everyone with courtesy. Lady Cordelia, however, grew more venomous with each passing day, her hatred a living thing. waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Queen's rage manifested during the winter festival, a week-long celebration culminating in the grand solstice ball. Finn had been training with the knights, and they arranged a demonstration, young squires showing their skills in mock combat. Alaric was proud, talking endlessly about Finn's natural talent. The day of the demonstration arrived bright and cold, the courtyard packed with spectators. I stood among the noble ladies, feeling their eyes on me, hearing whispers that never quite stopped. Finn fought 3 matches, winning 2 and losing 1 with such grace that I saw approval in the watching crowd. Alaric was beaming. Then Lady Cordelia made her move. She descended from her viewing platform, her crimson gown flowing like blood on snow. The crowd parted, everyone sensing something significant was about to happen. "A fine display," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Though I wonder if all of them have earned their place here through legitimate means." The crowd went silent. Finn's face flushed, but he kept his composure. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I have earned my place through hard work and dedication, the same as any squire." "Have you?" Cordelia's smile was sharp as glass. "Or through the accident of your birth and your mother's manipulation?" Gasps rippled through the onlookers. I started forward, but a hand stopped me, Lady Helena, one of the few noblewomen who had shown me kindness. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "She wants you to react." On the field, Alaric had gone very still, his eyes fixed on his wife with an expression that promised consequences. "Tell me, boy," Cordelia continued, "do you know what we call children born outside of marriage, especially those born to servants who seduce their betters?" "Cordelia!" Alaric's voice was low and dangerous, but she ignored him. Finn lifted his chin. "I know what people call me, Your Majesty, just as I know what they call women who cannot give their husbands heirs." The crowd's collective intake of breath was audible. Cordelia's face went white, then red. "How dare you? How dare I speak the truth?" Finn interrupted. "You questioned my legitimacy, Your Majesty. I merely pointed out that glass houses make poor fortresses for throwing stones." For a moment, I thought Cordelia might strike him. Her hand rose, trembling with rage, but Alaric was there, placing himself between his wife and his son. "That's enough," he said. "From both of you." "Both of us?" Cordelia's laugh was brittle. "Your bastard insults me publicly, and you equate our behaviours?" "He defended himself against your provocation," Alaric corrected. "Perhaps you should focus less on his birth and more on why you felt the need to attack a 13-year-old boy." The Queen stared at her husband as if seeing a stranger. "You've changed. That woman and her whelp have changed you." "No," Alaric replied. "They've reminded me of who I was before duty turned me into stone." Cordelia looked between them, and I saw calculation replace rage. "Very well. If you wish to claim the bastard as your son, if you wish to humiliate me before the entire court, then do so formally. Let's see how the nobles react when you attempt to legitimize a servant's spawn." "I intend to," Alaric said, sending shockwaves through the crowd. Cordelia smiled, a terrible expression. "Then let us be clear about what you're choosing. Legitimizing him means setting aside our marriage, which was made with the blessing of my father's kingdom and the church. It means potential conflict with my family. It means dividing your nobles. Are you prepared for that, husband? Are you prepared to sacrifice everything for them?" Alaric looked at Finn, then at me. I gave a slight nod. He turned back to Cordelia. "I'm prepared to do what I should have done 13 years ago. Stand by my son." The Queen's expression hardened. "Then you're a fool." She swept away, leaving a stunned crowd in her wake. That night, Alaric came to our chambers looking exhausted. "I've made it worse. Cordelia's right. Legitimizing Finn could tear the kingdom apart." "Then don't," I said simply. He looked up, shocked. "What?" "Don't legitimize him. Not if it means destruction. Finn doesn't need a title to know you claim him. He needs a father who's present, who teaches him, who loves him. But he deserves a father, Alaric. Not chaos." I leaned forward, taking his hands. "I didn't come here to destroy your kingdom. I came so he could know you. What if I want more than that? What if I want to marry you, legitimize Finn, make you queen?" My breath caught. You don't mean that, don't I? His eyes were intense. I've spent 13 years in a loveless marriage playing politics, doing my duty. I'm tired, Mira. And if choosing your heart means choosing conflict? He was silent because we both knew the answer. Then I choose both, he said finally. I'll find a way. That's not how the world works, I said gently. Then I'll change how the world works. I'm the king. The next morning brought news that tested his resolve. A messenger arrived from Cordelia's father, King Edmund, a formal letter declaring that if Alaric legitimized his bastard son, it would be considered a violation of the marriage treaty and grounds for potential conflict. Alaric called another council meeting, including Finn and me. The advisors laid out the situation: legitimize Finn and face probable strife, or maintain the status quo and keep peace. There must be another option, Alaric insisted. There isn't, Lord Pembroke said gently. It was Finn who spoke next. Don't legitimize me. Don't start trouble over me. I don't need a title to know who I am. Finn, Alaric started. I'm your son, Finn interrupted. That's enough. Let me prove myself through my own actions. If I'm worthy of being a prince, I'll show it. I felt tears prick my eyes at his maturity. Alaric looked at his son with such profound love and pride. You're already worthy, Alaric said hoarsely. Then let me show it, Finn replied. Give me time. Let me win them over, and when the time is right, when it won't cost lives, then we can revisit this. The advisors nodded approvingly. Very well, Alaric said. But make no mistake, Finn. You are my son and my heir in all but name. And someday, when circumstances allow, I will make it official. I know, Finn said and smiled. Father. It was the first time he had used that word, and I watched it hit Alaric like a physical blow. The crisis was averted. Word was sent to King Edmund that the marriage treaty remained intact. The threat receded. The court breathed easier. But Lady Cordelia's hatred didn't diminish. She began working behind the scenes, gathering supporters, spreading rumours. That I was a witch who had seduced the king with dark magic. That I was manipulating Finn. That I had other lovers and Finn might not even be Alaric's son. I endured it, but I could see it affecting Finn. He got into fights defending my honour, which only made things worse. Things came to a head at the solstice ball itself, the longest night of the year. I debated whether to attend, but Alaric had personally requested my presence. I want you there, standing tall, showing them they can't break you. So I wore a gown of deep green silk, styled my hair elaborately, and walked into that ballroom with my head high. The whispers started immediately. But I had faced worse. I had survived abandonment and poverty and childbirth alone. I could survive their judgment. Finn was already there, standing with young nobles who genuinely liked him. Alaric entered last, wearing black and gold, his crown catching candlelight. But when his eyes found mine across the room, they softened. The evening proceeded with dances and toasts. I danced with minor nobles, with Finn, with Lord Pembroke. Then Alaric approached and extended his hand. May I have this dance, Lady Mira? The ballroom went silent. A king dancing with his acknowledged former lover was a statement, a claim. You don't have to do this, I whispered as he led me onto the floor. Yes, he replied. I do. We danced and the world narrowed to just us. I've missed this, he murmured. Missed you. You have me. In whatever way you can have me. It's not enough. His hand tightened. I want all of you. I want mornings and nights. I want to be yours the way you've always been mine. Alaric? I know all the reasons it's impossible, but I'm tired of impossible being the answer to everything that matters. The dance ended. Then Lady Cordelia made her final move. She rose, magnificent in crimson and diamonds, and called for silence. His Majesty's fondness for Lady Mira is well known. What's less known is that I've recently discovered evidence of her true character. My blood ran cold. What evidence? Alaric demanded. Cordelia gestured and guards brought forward Thomas, a fisherman from Millbrook who had once asked me to marry him and been refused. This man, Cordelia announced, has sworn testimony that Lady Mira engaged in inappropriate relations with multiple men during her time in Millbrook, that the boy Finn might not be the king's son at all. Gasps filled the room. Finn went white. Alaric looked like he might strike someone. That's a lie, I said clearly. Thomas, you know it's a lie. The fisherman wouldn't meet my eyes. I know what I saw, my lady. You with different men. You saw me working, I interrupted. Washing clothes by the river, cleaning fish at the market, doing whatever labor I could find to feed my son. Can you prove that? Cordelia asked sweetly. Look at me, Finn said, stepping into the center of the room. All of you, look at me. Tell me I'm not the king's son. Silence, because they could all see it. The resemblance was undeniable. Physical resemblance can be coincidental, Cordelia argued weakly. Then let's settle this the old way, Alaric said dangerously. Let her face a trial. Let witnesses be called, evidence examined. Or, I said quietly, and let me simply leave. Everyone turned to stare. Alaric's face went pale. No, he started. If my presence causes this much discord, perhaps it's better if Finn and I return to Millbrook. No, Finn said fiercely. I won't run. This isn't about winning or losing, I told him. It's about choosing our battles. Like hell it is, Alaric growled. He turned to the assembled court. Let me make something absolutely clear. Lady Mira and her son are under my protection. Anyone who spreads lies about them, anyone who threatens them, will answer to me personally. So you would choose them over your wife? Over your kingdom? Cordelia asked. If I have to, Alaric replied. Yes, Cordelia looked almost hurt. Then you're not the man I married. Good, Alaric said. Because the man you married was a coward who abandoned the woman he loved. I'd rather be a stranger than him. The confession hung in the air. Alaric had just admitted in front of his entire court that he loved me. Cordelia's face crumpled, then reformed into icy composure. I will petition the church for an annulment, on grounds of your inability to produce an heir and your obvious adultery. You'll have your freedom, husband. I hope it keeps you warm when your kingdom burns. She left, leaving stunned silence. Alaric turned to me, question and hope and fear in his eyes. Did I just destroy everything? Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe you just saved what actually matters. The ball dissolved into chaos. Alaric let them argue, his hand finding mine and holding tight, Finn standing on his other side. The three of us stood together as the storm raged, and I realized this was what family felt like. The following weeks were turbulent. Cordelia petitioned for annulment. King Edmund threatened conflict, but backed down when other kingdoms voiced support for Alaric. The nobles split into factions, but through it all we held together. Alaric spent every moment with Finn. I found my place advising on policies that would help the common people. And, slowly, I let myself trust in the possibility of happiness. 6 months later, the church granted the annulment. Cordelia returned to her father's kingdom, and rumour said she had found a new suitor. I hoped she would be happy, or at least content. 3 months after that, on a spring morning when cherry blossoms filled the air, Alaric asked me to marry him. Not as a king making a decree, but as a man on one knee in the garden where we had stolen our first kiss. I know I don't deserve you, he said, hands trembling. I know I failed you once, but I'm asking for a chance to spend the rest of my life making it right. Will you marry me, Mira? I looked at the man kneeling before me, powerful and vulnerable. King and father and the love of my life despite everything. Yes, I whispered. And then louder. Yes. He stood and kissed me like he was breathing me in. And I kissed him back with 13 years of longing and pain and love that had never quite died. We married in summer. Finn stood as Alaric's best man, proud in his new title. Prince Finn, legitimized at last, heir apparent. The nobles who had opposed us either came around or kept their dissent quiet. The wedding feast lasted 3 days, and on the final night, as we danced under stars, Alaric whispered, "Thank you." For what? For coming back. For being brave enough to demand what we deserved. For not giving up on us even when I had given up on myself. I didn't do it for us, I admitted. I did it for Finn. I know, he said. That's what makes it even more remarkable. Life as queen was not easy. There were still nobles who whispered about my common birth, still challenges to navigate. But I had Alaric by my side, and Finn growing into a remarkable young man, and a voice in shaping policies that made the kingdom more just. I established schools for poor children, Programs to help servants and the destitute, laws protecting women. I used my power not to forget where I came from, but to help others rise as I had risen. Years passed. Finn grew into a man who ruled with both strength and compassion, who never forgot that he had once been a bastard boy from a river town. He married for love, chose a clever merchant's daughter over a princess, and the kingdom thrived. And I, the girl who had been cast into the rain with nothing but a child and hope, became the queen who proved that love could triumph over duty, that mercy could coexist with strength, that the past could be transformed by courage. The rain had tried to wash me away, but I had returned as a storm. And in the end, I hadn't just survived. I had rewritten my story entirely. On my deathbed, decades later, with Alaric's weathered hand in mine and Finn's grown children playing in the gardens beyond our window, I thought about that girl in the rain, and I was proud of her. Proud of her fire, her refusal to disappear, her determination to be seen. "What are you thinking?" Alaric asked, his voice raspy with age but still warm with love. "That I would do it all again," I whispered. "Every hard moment, every fight, every tear, because they all led here." "To me," he asked with a small smile. "To us," I corrected. "To this. To a life that I chose rather than one that was chosen for me." He kissed my forehead gently. "You were always brave. From the very first moment I caught you falling. I just took too long to match your courage." "But you did match it," I said. "In the end, you did." As I drifted towards sleep for the final time, I felt no regret. My life had been hard, had been painful, had been unfair in 1,000 ways, but it had also been triumphant. I had loved and been loved. I had fought and won. I had turned abandonment into ascension, rain into rain, and that, I thought, was worth everything. Thank you for joining me on Mira's journey from the rain to the throne. If this story touched your heart, moved your spirit, or made you believe in the power of courage and love, I invite you to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your engagement means the world and helps stories like this reach others who need to hear them. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, powerful narratives that celebrate resilience, love, and the strength to rewrite our destinies. Until next time, may you find the courage to weather your own storms and emerge stronger.